Hey, welcome everybody to ConsensusCON 2020. Excited to be with you. My name is Garen Hess, and I am the CEO and founder of Consensus. And I'm really excited to kick off this conference. It's our first user conference, so thanks for joining us. We have a great lineup of internal users or internal experts from Consensus, and also users that join us from the community, as well as a few outside consultants and experts from the sales and pre-sales industry. So it's a great lineup and excited for what's coming here. I wanted to go through just a couple of housekeeping items first. One of them is that as we, at the end of the session today, we'll have a Q&A session, and this will be true for most of the sessions. And so if you have a question as you're going along, just go ahead and enter that in the Q&A area. So there's a little button in the Zoom for Q&A. You can always type whatever you want in the chat, but we won't see your question unless you type it into the Q&A area. It may get lost in the chat. So we'll have that Q&A section at the end of the session, but feel free to type those in at any time. Also, just want to make sure that everybody can hear me. So if you could just if you hear me, just click the raise hand button, and then I'll know that you can hear me. Okay. Okay, great. And go ahead and lower the hands there, and the screen sharing is on, I presume. So raise your hand again if you can see the screen. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, you can lower the hand again. I just like to do that because there was a time when I spoke for about 10 minutes and nobody could hear me. So that's a little thing I like to do. So just a couple of other things before we get going. I want to mention that we are launching a forum, a community forum here in a few days. So our client success team will be announcing that, so be on the lookout for that. Also, we're kicking off a customer webinar series. So the client success team is also doing that, and they will be doing a monthly webinar starting in December on different consensus topics. So we can continue to learn more in depth about consensus through those mediums. I hope you can really get involved in the user forum. Forums are great for asking questions, sharing, learning from others in the community, and we hope that can be a real good resource for everybody. So today's session is called The Consensus Vision, How Demo Automation Scales Pre-Sales, Improves the Buying Experience, and helps infuse passion into sales engineering. And I want to introduce also Miles Taylor, who's in the background. He's going to be moderating this session on chat. If you have any concerns or problems, just chat with him in the chat area. So thanks, Miles, for helping out. He's one of our client success managers here at Consensus. And with that, I think we're going to dive right into the presentation. So I'm going to start with just a little story from my childhood. My dad, we had a pretty good sized yard in a small, with a small house on it. So it was I think about a half-acre lot and a small house. So we had this really nice lawn to play football on, and we'd constantly in the summertime be playing football on this big lawn. And one day he backed up this big dump truck. Somebody came with a dump truck and covered about half of the lawn with dirt. And my dad wanted to plant a garden, and he wanted to teach us how to do gardening. And along with that, he also brought a whole bunch of hay bales and stacked them up behind the garage. I don't know, there were probably 15 or 20 hay bales. And we had the job eventually of taking those hay bales and spreading them all over the garden. In the meantime, all these hay bales were sitting there in the back of the garage, and we thought it would be really fun to build a hut or a fort out of these hay bales. This is not a picture of the actual, this is just one I found online, so sorry, but ours was much more grandiose. It had 2 floors and little tunnels all throughout. But this is a likeness, I suppose, and we spent days on end building that and appointing it with carpet and whatnot inside. And my dad made this really interesting comment that I'll never forget. He said, you know, if I would have asked you, I was probably about 11 years old. And he said, if I would have asked you to go move all those hay bales and build, you know, something, you would have complained about it. But because you wanted to do it, it wasn't work to you, was it? And I remember thinking about that going, oh, that is interesting, because he was absolutely right. I was pretty much a complainer at that age. And if he would have asked me to do it, yeah, I would have complained to high heaven. So this reminds me of a quote by Simon Sinek, where he said, working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. So one of the things Simon Sinek also talked about, if you've seen his famous TED Talk about, we should be communicating the why of what we do. So you all know that we do intelligent demo automation, help scale pre-sales, and help drive more effective go-to-market execution. But why do we do this? And so I wasn't sure if you'd be really interested in hearing all this, but I think it's important to understand what's driving us here at Consensus. And what drives me, I was the original designer of the software solution of the intelligent demo automation. And I wanted to share a little bit about the vision around why it is what we do, and what our purpose and goals are with it. So I want to share something that I hope is not controversial. If it is, please forgive me. But I was in a therapy session once, a family therapy session, where one of my loved ones was in addiction recovery. And the therapist had us in this session, and it was a faith-based session. And she wrote this little interesting thing on the whiteboard. And I think whether you're faith-oriented or not, I think there's something interesting to learn about it. And also, you get an insight into me, and just what some of the driving forces are behind what I think about and what motivates me. What she did was she wrote on the board, on the whiteboard, she said, "What is God?" And we had a bunch of different answers. And she said, well, the way I'm thinking about it for this discussion is God is a creator. And she said, and what are you? And we said, and we were sitting there thinking, and she wrote on the board, well, you are a child of God. So if God is a creator and you're a child of God, then what are you? And she said, and she wrote on the board, creator. And I thought that was really interesting. And then she asked this profound question, which I think, regardless of how you know, whether you believe in God or not, or any of this, she asked this question, what are you creating? And she was trying to get these folks that were struggling. This was in a kind of a family group session with multiple families. She's trying to get these folks who are struggling with addiction to think about, what are they creating every moment? And they would have these activities. There was this equine therapy, actually would go work with horses. So it was really fascinating. And they would require us, before we'd go out and work with horses, to tell the group what we were going to create. And that was a little awkward at first. I didn't really understand what they were getting at. But when she went through this exercise, it started to make sense. And she basically said, every moment of your life, you're creating something. The question is, what are you creating? And the reason I bring this up is because at the core of what I believe that humans are creators. You know, whether you believe why they're creators, you know, I really believe that at the core they're creators. And the other thing is, I think that sales engineers in particular are creators. You know, they're creating solutions, they're creating relationships, they're creating confidence, they're creating business success, they're creating all kinds of things. And one of the things that I saw early on is that when sales engineers are involved in doing too many demos that are not creative in nature, they lose motivation. So, you know, if that describes you, maybe this will resonate, or if it describes people on your team. So one of the things I really care about is trying to help people reach their potential, and not only people but organizations. And it bothers me when things inhibit our potential, and it bothers me when things inhibit our organizational potential. And so years ago, when I was actually my last startup, I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I was in a different tech startup, and I was trying to back up my sales team. We didn't have sales engineers per se in that particular organization, but we were doing these product demos, and they were swamped. And I took 6 demos in one day, and I remember just thinking, this is the same thing over and over, a little bit different way. I was customizing it to each prospect, but it was largely the same thing, right? As Peter Cohen often calls it, the Harbor Cruise demo. And I thought there's got to be a better way. This is not fulfilling at all. And I've since learned that sales engineers feel the same way. And I've acted as a sales engineer throughout my career in different roles, different situations. I at one point was a trainer inside an organization, an installer for an on-prem solution, and I learned the solution so well that people started pulling me into sales calls. They didn't have sales engineers per se until later, and then I ended up training the sales engineers. So that was my first exposure about 20 years ago to sales engineering. So, but I'm going to talk about 3 different ways that consensus and intelligent demo automation helps drive exponential potential. So first of all, the first one is improving the B2B buying experience. There are 3 components to this exponential potential purpose, and improving the B2B buying experience is one of them. So you've probably seen this from Gartner. It's made the rounds quite a bit. It is a depiction of how difficult the buying journey really is. We often think that the buyer goes through this very sequential process to make a decision. In reality, it's very highly recursive with as many as 13 or 14 stakeholders getting involved. So it's a very difficult and somewhat treacherous journey trying to buy your solutions. And buyer behavior is changing. And this other reference point from Gartner shows that buyers are only spending about 17% of their buying activity time with vendors. And if there are 2 or 3 vendors that are competing, you might only get 5% of their time. So there's this question of how do we facilitate what's going on in between? So add to that when Gartner asked buyers what they want most from vendors, demonstrations was number 1. And then case studies and value assessments were a close second and third. Value assessment tools, meaning ROI calculators and things like that. So buyers really want these demos. They want a demo early. They want a demo often, as you know, and it can really put a strain on the selling organization. And the other problem is that when we did our 2020 sales engineering compensation and workload survey that was released earlier this year, and we're going to, by the way, release another one. We're just about to send the survey out here for the 2021 publication. The demo lag time, meaning the time between a customer requesting a demo and the time that the demo was delivered, was quite a lengthy delay. So 60% reported that prospects have to wait at least a week. So if you think about the buying experience, that's a horrible buying experience, not to mention that it lengthens out the sales cycle. And 1/5 of the industry said that prospects have to wait at least 2 weeks. So one of the main objectives that we have is to improve the buying experience. And that's one part of helping reach that exponential potential. I cover a lot of the methodology for improving the buying experience and making buying easier in a book called Selling is Hard, Buying is Harder that I published earlier this year. And I'm going to have a session specifically on this buyer enablement topic at the end of the conference. So if you can think about our demo automation software as what we do, the buyer enablement methodology or approach is our recommended way to go about doing it. So I'll share more about that in a different session, but needless to say, one of our main focuses on making buying easier and making the buyer experience better. So obviously the way that that works with Consensus is the sales rep, after the sales engineering team has built out these demos, the sales rep sends a demo to a prospect, that prospect sends the demo on to other key stakeholders, and so you're able to discover and engage those stakeholders more effectively. So the second part of reaching or achieving exponential potential, or helping our customers reach that, is infusing passion in sales engineering. So one of the things that we saw in the sales engineering compensation and workload report is we had a question about qualified demos. And by the way, you can download this report for free from our website if you have never seen it. And this particular area in the workload section asked a question about what percentage of the demos that they did were under or unqualified. You can see there's quite a range, but some respondents mentioned as much as 70% of their demos are unqualified, which would be quite demoralizing. So if you look at kind of the takeaway here, more than half of the participants report that at least 30% of their demos are or underqualified. And then about a fifth of the whole industry said half of their demos are unqualified, at least half. So it creates a big opportunity not only to improve productivity, but if you think about the morality hit that comes when morale hit. That reminds me, I was reading a news article, I think it was by the Washington Post, on a comedian, Crosby, that had died, and he was famous for malapropism. So they said he died, and he, in his comic acts, he destroyed words with great extinction. Anyway, I guess that was his shtick, was doing that. So anyway, so you think about the morale hit on sales engineers, who, if those of you who are sales engineers in the audience, are highly expert, smart, technical, and having to do the repetitive demos over and over is demotivating. Not to mention that it's inefficient if they are unqualified. And so we came up with this concept of the demo qualified lead. And the demo qualified lead is basically the concept that in the go-to-market sequence, where you have marketing qualified leads, sales accepted leads, sales qualified leads, qualified opportunities, and so on, where's the gate? How do you define the gate for when you get sales engineering involved? And so we call that a demo qualified lead, when they pass through that gate. And you have to decide what that is, but many of our customers are using interactive video demos to help with that qualification. So the other thing that's a big challenge for sales engineers is just the number of activities that they're asked to do. And this is probably not even all of them. But you think about being pulled in so many different directions, that could be really difficult. Your mental space is fragmented, and you don't ever feel like you have enough time to get done in the best way what you need to. And so one of the questions we like to ask is, what's the best use of the SE's time? So we have a concept in our Scaling Pre-Sales webinar, if you ever want to go look at that, or download the Scaling Pre-Sales ebook from our website, of the idea of key activity gaps. What's the gap between what you want your sales engineers to be doing and what they're actually doing in terms of the key activities? Because a lot of their time is spent doing things that are maybe not the best use of their time. not only is it not the best use, but it's also demotivating for them, and you may experience higher turnover if you don't address this. So to briefly talk about what key activities or what demos can be automated, we need to talk briefly about different demo types. And so I'm summarizing some things that we spend a lot of time on in other webinars and things. So there's a separate webinar on the 6 demo types and where they belong. So that may be something. But one of the keys to this is that a lot of times sales engineers and salespeople think of the demo as just the demo, the big demo, which we call the technical demo right here. But there are many types of demos that sales engineers get involved in that take up a lot of their time. A lot of times the vision or micro demo, which is really early stage demos, are the quick Harbor Cruise demos. You've got a sales rep that says, hey, what can you show in 20 minutes or a half an hour? And it's just that quick, generalized, repetitive demo, focusing a lot on product, solution, benefit, and some looking into the platform. The qualifying demo, or what's often called the standard demos, another one, deeper dive, but it's still repetitive and generic. And then of course there's the pre-sales technical demo that is not good for automation. And then closing demos are those kinds of things that the buyer's trying to, they have questions about near the closing stages of their purchase. So it could be things like, how do you deal with GDPR? Do you integrate with such and such? And you might demonstrate that in your demo. But before you actually get to the point where you're demonstrating in a POC or something, they often need a little bit of education just about how you typically handle that. And then throughout, you have these FAQ, what we call FAQ demos. So one of the goals that we have is trying to encourage everyone to think about the buying process from the buyer's perspective rather than a sales process from the sales perspective. Because as you think about that, you'll be able to better understand what the buyers need at different stages. So one of the questions is, if we make the presumption that sales engineers are pulled in so many different directions, and by automating some of the repetitive demos could free up some of their time, the question is, what kinds of demos should you automate? And so really, in a lot of ways, you can automate everything but that live technical deep dive demo. And the benefit to that is not only do the buyers get a demo sooner because they get it as soon as they ask for it, because the salesperson can send out a link, but also it frees up time for the sales engineers to either handle more of these other types of demos, the technical demos, or be more prepared. So how many times as sales engineers do we go into these technical demos not feeling fully prepared because we spent so much time being pulled in all these other different directions? So another way to think about these different demo types is what we call selling in the gaps. So if you think about the Gartner research that says that the buyers are spending less and less time with vendors. The question is, how do we engage them between the live conversations? And so this is just a brief look at how you might deploy your different types of demos at different stages of the buying process. So the goal with selling in the gaps is to send an automated demo between the appointments to better qualify the prospects, and it shortens the sales cycle. And of course, you also get to discover and engage different stakeholders. And the demo qualified lead watches a demo before engaging a pre-sales resource. So we have one customer out in the UK that is running a commercial sales team, and they're using their sales engineering automated demos that were built for them, and they refuse to ask sales engineering to get on a call unless the prospect will watch an interactive video demo. Because in the words of this customer of ours, Patrick, he said, well, if they won't watch an interactive video demo, is it a real deal then? And so we saw that as a qualification. That was their DQL way of doing that. So if we were to say that the key activities that we want them to be focusing on, which of course you'll have to decide, include these blue circles. Well, then the question is, how do we help automate or semi-automate some of these other things? And so our goal is to help automate the micro demos and the standard qualifying demos and repetitive FAQ and closing demos, for example. So again, the idea is to free up time. Well, how much time can you free up? Here's just a simple example of how a sales engineer could free up as much as 10 hours a week, which is quite a lot of time. So let's just say that the hours spent on a demo is 3 with prep and of course no more travel at the moment, and the demo. And minutes spent answering questions, 30 minutes. These are just some assumptions for a little ROI analysis I'm going to do. And the number of automated demos per week that we can get done is, say, 3. And the number of automated FAQ responses per week is 10. Well, what we're saying here is we're saying total time savings of about 41 hours a month. And if you think about, it's almost 500 hours a year. How much more prepared can you be, or how much more capacity can you handle? One of our customers said they were able to double their pre-sales capacity with their existing headcount by using automated demos. So what's the time ROI? If you spent 4 hours to create each automated demo and you spent 30 minutes to create automated question response, and you were to create 3 demos and 10 question responses over the course of a couple of months, you'd spend 17 hours creating these demos, and then you'd say 492 hours. This is just a rough ROI, kind of a time ROI, but hopefully it gives you an idea of how much more you can free up your sales engineering time by using demo automation. And not only that, but it's going to increase the morale of sales engineers, because, and we hear this repeatedly, that morale is boosted because they're spending less time on these repetitive demos that don't really require them to use the skills they're really best at. And again, this gets back to this potential. What are you creating? When you're in a repetitive demo that you've done 1,000 times, do you feel creative? Do you feel fulfilled? I know I don't. And so this is just the why behind what we do, and one of the goals is really to help elevate the experience and the job fulfillment of every sales engineer, and that's just part of that exponential potential formula. So ultimately, the ROI on this comes out at 59 freed up days per year. So lastly, the last component is just the organizational potential. What's the exponential potential of the pre-sales organization? And as we like to say, our goal is to help scale pre-sales with intelligent demo automation. Intelligent because our demos automatically personalize to each stakeholder, as most of you know. So a comment on scaling. So scaling is not hiring. A lot of times we see organizations say scaling is, we're scaling and they're hiring lots of people. Well, that's not really scaling. That is growing. You're growing, but scaling is really about getting exponential results from existing resources. So when we think about scaling pre-sales, we're not talking about just getting more budget and hiring more sales engineers. Certainly that's going to be important, but how can we drive a better customer experience and get more output at the same time? So some of the main problems that we help with in the way that we scale, one of the challenges are growing sales teams, which because of the pandemic, a lot of organizations are not really focused on that right now. But nonetheless, as sales teams grow, it can be hard for pre-sales to keep up because there's a major disconnect between the amount of time it takes to onboard a sales rep and the time it takes to become an expert product solution consultant. And it can be the difference can be as much as a couple of years, 5 to 6 months to get to onboard a sales rep, and 2 to 3 years to become a highly proficient sales engineer. So demo automation can help fill some of that gap. Growing down market, or if you already have a down market strategy where you have commercial or small business sales, a lot of organizations try to implement because it's what they know, a high touch sales process going down market, and it hurts their margins and makes it difficult to be a viable revenue stream. And so demo automation can help with that. Some of our customers report closing deals as high as $80,000 with no demos done at all, no live demos. They're all handled remotely or automatically through the demo automation. So that's one of the other places that we help scale in pre-sales. And again, this allows your pre-sales resources to focus more on those key accounts that you want to have those expert resources involved in. Then lastly is a demo qualified lead, which we've already talked about, but it helps more effectively qualify leads to engage with pre-sales resources. So if we look at the exponential potential, which is our purpose, is to help drive exponential potential in individuals, in the sales engineering, and in the organizations. And also want to mention the sales reps. Many of you participating in this conference may be sales reps, sending and tracking the demos. And even though we talk a lot about sales engineers, because that's where all of this starts, how much more effective are you as a sales rep, because you can service those customers right away and more effectively see their engagement, discover and engage those stakeholders and so on. But if we look at the three components, automating the demos to improve the buying experience is number one, and then free up the sales engineering time for key activities, and that helps drive passion and enthusiasm about the sales engineering role rather than decreasing morale because it's just focused on repetitive demos. And then lastly, scaling pre-sales in the organization. So that concludes my formal part of this presentation. I want to, before we get into Q&A, I want to just tee up a couple of other sessions that I want to plug. One of them is about our product roadmap. So that's coming up tomorrow at 9 a.m., which Brian Zurcher, who looks after our product management, and we work together a lot on product design and roadmaps and things. We'll be on that session tomorrow. So these are just a few sneak peeks of some of the things we'll be sharing. So wanted to tease that. And now we'll get into Q&A. So I'm just going to pop open the Q&A here. One of the questions that has come up, which I'm not surprised has come up because this is a question we hear every now and then, is do you ever hear that solution consultants fear that automated demos might replace them? And that's an absolute concern. Whenever there's any kind of automation, whether it's in sales engineering or whatever it might be, there's going to be a fear that it's going to replace them. And honestly, this is one of my goals, is to help sales engineers see that what we're trying to do is not replace them, but make the whole experience more effective and more enjoyable for sales engineers. So there's definitely that fear, but I would encourage you to embrace automation as a way to free up your time so that you can spend it on the most meaningful activities and really stretch and reach your potential rather than doing demo after demo. And I suppose if the sales engineers that really just hang their hat on doing these repetitive demos, maybe that is a valid concern. But if you're solution consultants that are really into the consulting aspect, then I think it is maybe something I would recommend that it's not something to be afraid of. It's something to embrace as something to improve how you do what you do. I have a slide in a different deck that shows kind of an Iron Man suit, right? Because that's the way we think of our software is we're the Iron Man suit for the sales engineers. So does an Iron Man suit replace the guy inside it? No, it makes them more effective, and that's really what our goal is. So another question here. I'm just going to move this over onto this screen. So this is from Galen. Thank you. I'm having trouble getting our marketing team to buy into Consensus. They feel we need better, more polished videos. Any thoughts on overcoming this? So this is a great question. We run into this a lot, and when marketing gets involved, because marketing has this idea that everything has to be highly produced. So what I'm going to do is paste in the chat an article that you'll want to read, and give me just a second. I'll paste this in here, and then I'll talk about it a little bit. So the URL leads to, it's a LinkedIn article that leads to maybe a more friendly title than what the URL suggests. But we used to have the same concept, Galen. So when we first started Consensus, we thought that everything had to be highly produced. I mean, that was our assumption. More highly produced and engages more. And we did that for 2 or 3 years and struggled to get the engagement, not only the engagement we wanted, but the getting the videos actually produced. And almost by accident, we produced a version of our demo that was non-scripted and just very authentic and raw. And we put it head to head against our highly produced motion graphics, voiceover, narration, music, et cetera, demo. And it was amazing because that voiceover, that highly produced demo with all those videos in it, it took about, I think about 5 weeks to make. Excuse me. And this authentic demo took, I think, 3 days or so, maybe 5 days. Anyways, a really short amount of time. And it says in the article. And what was amazing is the authentic demo videos that were so much less produced got way more engagement. And so this article may help them understand. Sometimes we get on calls, and I'm happy to get on a call if you want me to get on a call, or your client success reps to get on a call with the marketing team to talk about this. We were talking about this concept. The authentic video gets 3 times the engagement and takes 1/5 the time to create. And not only have we seen that in our own testing, but we've seen it time and time again. We have some case studies and things that I think will help as well. And we're telling this to one customer, and the customer said, "Oh, you mean think YouTube, not Hollywood?" And so we've kind of adopted that mantra. Think YouTube, not Hollywood. You think about all the YouTube videos that you would watch. Sometimes I'll watch YouTube video from some person that doesn't even speak English, because they've got good content, and I'll watch the content trying to understand how to do something. And if there's one thing that YouTube has shown us, is that you don't have to have highly produced content to get huge engagement. So another thing is you could just talk to them about testing and just say, okay, if you believe that it has to be highly produced, we've been told that it doesn't, let's just do some testing and see what happens. What I will say is, in the earlier stages, that vision demo, you may want to have a more highly produced, vision demo. It's the very first thing they see on the website. It's often just a single video, explainer video kind of thing, and that's fine. That's really where marketing plays the role, is in that first vision demo. Other than that, it really should be all about pre-sales, building the content. So hopefully that helps. Okay, so that concludes. Those are the only 2 questions I've had. If there are any other questions, feel free to put those in. What I want to end on today is just sharing that, inviting you to the session tomorrow afternoon, which is more focused on buyer enablement, which is the focus on the book that I mentioned. It's not focused on the book, but the framework from the book, which is called Deep C, which stands for Discover, Engage, Equip, Personalize, and Coach. And it's this framework for enabling your champion to then go out and do the selling for you inside the organization. So I want to encourage you to attend that if you are interested in making the buying process easier as a way to improve the buying experience and close deals faster. And coming up after this session at the top of the hour is Implementation with Intention with Tony Franchetic from Thomson Reuters, and the magic combination of Consensus plus Salesforce, where Brian Zurcher and some other folks on our product side will be sharing and demonstrating the Salesforce native app that we have that helps integrate and also so Consensus can be used by salespeople from Salesforce. So these are excellent sessions. I encourage you to attend them. And anyway, it's been a pleasure to be with you today, and I appreciate the opportunity to work with you and your organizations. It's the joy of my life. It's going back to the concept of creation. One of the things I love about what I get to do and we get to do as a team is we create these solutions and get to see the actual results happen inside your organization. So we'll do anything and everything we can to help you be successful. So never hesitate to reach out. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of the conference.